I think some GPU retailers are breaking the law with how they are handling the weird MSRP situation with AMD's 9070 XT launch. However, I am not a lawyer. I'll just present my understanding of the situation and the evidence. You guys make make of it what you will. We also have lots of other news topics to talk about today. There should be some timestamps down below if you want to jump around to ones, and I'll link all my sources in the video description. But let's jump in with this. So this is making the rounds. A lot of buyers are experiencing this kind of situation. And this is from somebody who bought a GPU at MSRP from eBuyer in the UK. And they ordered it at the MSRP pricing. They placed their order, the order went through. However, hours later, they're being contacted, told that the order has been canceled, not because they're out of stock, but because they are selling the stock they have left at a higher price than what was originally listed. Read this wording very carefully. So it says, "Good morning, I'm contacting you regarding your recent purchase with eBuyer. Unfortunately, we were only allocated a limited number of units at the price offered by AMD." Notice they're not saying a limited number of units, they're saying a limited of units at that price, okay? "And we won't be receiving any additional stock at this price. As you can imagine, this launch has been extremely popular and we have now sold out at that price." Not have sold out of stock, have sold out of cards at that price. "As a result of this, your pre-order has been canceled and any payments have been reversed. We sincerely apologize, blah, 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 eBuyer." Okay, now there's been other discussions of this online, like asking eBuyer to clarify why the cards that were originally available at MSRP were then relisted at a higher price, okay? Again, indicating that they're not out of stock of the exact product, but that product, these orders have been canceled, and then the product has been listed at a higher price. So we're getting the question, eBuyer want to explain why you've jacked up the price of the Pulse RX 9070 XT when the RRP is $569.99. Blatant scalping. Anyway, showing the listing that it's now listed for more, and that again, they appear to have this for sale, but at a different price than what was originally listed. eBuyer responding with, "Good morning. Unfortunately, we were only allocated a limited number of units at the price offered by AMD. Once these were sold, we did have to sell these our normal cost. We understand your frustration and we do apologize. Thanks, Tiff." So I want to be clear here. Again, once again, I am not a lawyer. I will present I looked up, is it legal? Again, they operate in the UK, to list a product at a certain price, allow people to place an order at that price, charge them at that price, and then cancel the order despite having stock available, and then relist that exact same product that you still had stock for at a higher price than what was originally listed. Because this is confirming that's what they're doing here. They're not saying that they are out of stock. They're saying they're selling these at the normal cost after the limited number of units at the price offered by AMD, in other words, AMD MSRP, were sold. Okay? So is this legal? Again, I am not a lawyer and I don't even live in the UK, but I did look up uk.gov or .gov.uk answer to pricing in store. Are you breaking the law? And I feel like that it is potentially breaking several of these things, including do not display the wrong price for a product. You have to sell the price at what it was listed for. You must match the price to what you charge at the till. Do not display different prices for the same product. You can't just hide price information. They don't seem to be violating that. And again, must clearly display the total selling price, etc. Anyway, so I'm sure, now this isn't the actual laws themselves as they're listed, it's just some guidance on here. But in general, my understanding is you can't just have a product listed at a certain price, allow someone to pay for the product, and then choose to be like, wait, never mind, guys. We're actually going to sell this at a higher price. And I know we have it right here, but no, it's going to cost more now. Again, maybe there's some legality loopholes on all of this. Again, I am not a lawyer. However, this also doesn't appear to be the only store doing this type of thing. This is just the most publicized kind of example of it. Now, why would any of this be happening anyway? What do they mean about a limited number of units at the price offered by AMD? And once those are gone, they don't get any more at that price. This might be a little confusing for the general consumer to understand. So let's put a few other details together. First of all, has AMD responded to anything regarding this weird, like, wait, there's only a certain amount of supply for MSRP and then it's gone? Is that a fake MSRP? Is AMD the ones who is responsible for some sort of false advertising? We do have Frank Azor on Twitter saying, demand today for our new AMD Radeon cards has been phenomenal. We're working with our AIBs to replenish stock at our partners ASAP in the coming days and weeks. MSRP pricing, excluding region-specific tariffs and or taxes, interesting, for people in the United States, will continue to be encouraged beyond today, so don't despair. Now, continue to be encouraged. So he's not really explaining what is AMD doing to enable certain models or a certain quantity of certain models to be sold at MSRP and then other ones can't be. And there's like a limited quantity of all of that. I think the best explanation of what's going on with this I've seen has come from Hardware Unboxed. There's a lot to read here. But here's their understanding of it. They're saying that retailers have been buying and stockpiling RDNA 4 cards since January at a price much higher than the $550, $600 US or equivalent MSRPs. And then, so how do they meet those MSRPs if they bought their stock at a higher price than that? So the expectation was that a rebate from AMD to enable prices near the MSRP once the price reduced at the last minute was announced. But of course, these rebates are selective and only apply to limited quantities of some models. So that's the general idea. You can read this whole post if you want to see all of it. But the general idea is that, okay, so if these GPUs were originally planned to have a higher price tag, and then AMD changed their minds, but stores have already purchased stock at a certain price that is now too high to sell at MSRP, then what do? Well, AMD can give the store a rebate to make up the difference. But if AMD only supplies a certain quantity of rebates, then the store can only sell a certain amount of product at the MSRP price before they would start actually losing money on the sale. Now, I don't know if that I think that explains what retailers are doing with things like this, but I don't know whether it makes it legally okay to have allowed people to place orders in quantities that are beyond what that stock was, and then tell them, wait, never mind, sorry, we still have stock, but we can't sell it to you at the price we had advertised. I'm not sure if that makes that legal. Again, I am not a lawyer, and I don't even live in the UK, but I know this is happening in, I think, multiple regions. This is not the only example of that happening. It's just an example of this happening. Anyway, so then they start getting into whether or not this can continue. So what does Frank Azor mean when he's talking about continuing to encourage these kinds of pricing, MSRP pricing being available beyond today? So, well, that could mean offering additional quantities of these rebates to retailers. That could make more of these available at that price. Another possibility would be completely changing the initial pricing as things get into the system, right? Because AMD sells stuff to AIB card manufacturers who purchase things at a certain price, and then they have their own margins and they make their cooler model, and then they sell stuff to stores who then need to mark up a certain amount to make their margins, right? So the beginning of that chain starts with AMD. So if AMD reduced their price they're charging to AIBs, then this whole chain could reduce the price from the beginning without requiring rebates at the end. So that's another way that this could happen to at least improve stock, moving forward. Now, we don't know what any of AMD's specific margins are on any of these products or how likely they are to do this kind of thing. But there's at least, some hint that they're claiming at least that they will try to continue to make more MSRP pricing available. I know the experience I've seen reading comments on my channel seems to be that if you are near a micro center, you are able to get a card pretty easily. If you're not near a micro center and you're trying to buy online, things were a bit of a mess. Now, even if they were a bit of a mess, that doesn't mean that there weren't tons selling online. Apparently, we have articles saying that the tons of the top 10 spots on Amazon for best-selling graphics cards filled up with AMD 9070 cards. Not every single spot, but a bunch of them. So there does seem to be a bunch of these selling online, but it was very hard for people to get them. That's potentially due to scalpers. Now, it'll be interesting to watch these scalping listings, because at least from what I've seen, it seems like some of these scalped card listings are starting to be relisted at lower and lower prices, meaning the best way to combat scalping on these is don't buy the scalped GPU. And I wonder if the GPU scalping is going to work as well on these AMD cards as it does for Nvidia cards, given you're, I think, generally targeting a different buyer. I think people interested in the AMD products are generally more value-conscious shoppers looking for that kind of alternative to save money that still meets their needs. So if you suddenly jack up the price to ridiculous levels, I don't think you're targeting the same kind of person who was going to buy a 5090 at $2,000 anyway and is just like, well, spend another $1,000. It's no big deal, right? It's really a different buyer for this type of scalping. So anyway, I'm curious how that's going to go. Now, another interesting thing to watch is whether AMD is going to be able to claim any market share. Because one thing does seem to be the case, it at least seems like in any retailers that make their quantities of product known to the public, that the 9000 series launch from AMD did seem to have a lot more supply available than most of the 50 series cards that we've seen so far, which is pretty interesting, and that's how AMD would regain market share. Speaking of market share, there's a good post over here at 3dcenter.org, and again, all my sources will be linked in the video description, referencing some new market research from John Petty Research talking about the market share for AMD, Nvidia, and Intel in desktop GPUs. And it's pretty interesting. If you look at the last year or two of data here, starting with quarter 4 2023, and going to quarter 4 2024, so a year of data, we can see that AMD's market share dropped from 19% to 12%, 12%, 10%, and then back up to 17% by quarter 4. This is the new data that we didn't have until just now. And notice that Nvidia's market share then kind of dropped as well to make up for. So AMD did capture a little bit right at the end of 2024, and Intel went back up from they were at 1% down to less than 1%, rounding down to 0.000, and then back up to 1%. Nice. Again, I think that's right at the end of quarter 4, they had their launch of their new GPU series. So again, though, this is quarter 4 of 2024. This is AMD market share bumping up before they've actually launched their new product. This is also before Nvidia launched their new product. And notice that Nvidia's sales volume is dropping here. So what could explain this? Remember that Nvidia's 4000 series cards are pretty much out of stock now too. So I think what happened there is Nvidia stopped producing a lot of 4000 series cards. So as those dried up, I think it made people more willing to turn to an alternative that had supply. That was AMD's 7000 series, which then started to dry up too, but I think it took a little bit longer. And I think that would explain that jump back up in AMD market share for quarter 4. If you want to look at a longer-term graph of this, this is going all the way back to 2002 and then up to quarter 4 of 2024 at the end here. You can see that for a while there in the 04-05 region, it wasn't as dominant for Nvidia versus AMD here, but it's just continued to trend with more and more market share going to Nvidia, less and less going to AMD, but then we did get this little blip back up at that quarter. So what's interesting here is if Nvidia is still not really producing 4000 series, it seems like, And it doesn't seem like they produced a lot of 5000 series. They've been in demand, but like their lack of, it seems more like a lack of supply issue than an extremely high demand issue. At least that's how I've interpreted the evidence I've seen so far. So if AMD really did supply a massive amount of 9000 series and managed to sell it out, that would be interesting in terms of gaining some market share. That's what they need to do to gain market share. Now, that doesn't mean that Nvidia isn't restocking any of their 50 series cards, but I saw an interesting headline here at WCCF Tech. German retailer receives new stock of Nvidia GeForce RTX 5080 and 5070 Ti, but at somewhat higher prices than MSRP. So in other words, there's getting to be more stock, but again, MSRPs, those aren't the cards that seem to be getting restocked. So unfortunately, prices are still seeming pretty high even on the restocks. Now, in further 50 series news though, while Nvidia announced the 50 series of cards, and on their official 50 series family chart from CES, it ranged from the 5090 down to the 5070. There was zero mention of a 5060. We are now starting to see a bunch of leaks that the 5060 family is about to be announced, and then will be available a month after that. We have Megasize GPU on Twitter, who has made a history of accurate leaks in the past, saying the RTX 5060 family will be released, probably means like revealed, like a reveal announcement from Nvidia in about 10 days, but will be on the shelf a month later. And usually it's by the time they're on the shelf, you usually get reviews, a day. Like with the 50 series launches so far, the review embargoes have been 1 day before the retail availability for the MSRP cards, MSRP cards, and then the above MSRP cards are review embargo the date that the cards are actually on the shelf. Anyway, Megasize GPU is not the only person claiming this. At videocards.com, they have cited their own sources that they are claiming are independent of Megasize GPU, although perhaps both of those have the same source, but not claiming Megasize GPU as their source, but claiming their own sources within AIBs, the same kind of information. So they say that specifically they're hearing about March 13th. And again, they are also citing Megasize GPU having the same info, but not saying that that was their source of the info. We also have WCCF Tech claiming to have their own sources revealing the same thing, but they're going a step further and claiming that they've also started to hear whispers of a 50-50. And now with the 40 series for desktops, we never got a 4050. Some people argue that the 4060 was the 4050. It just got named higher and priced higher. Make of that what you will. WCCF Tech is at least claiming that there's whispers of an 8GB 5050 in order to compete at a lower price point, more in line with Intel's B580. It'll be interesting to see if anything comes of that. The 5060 cards are being rumored to be a 5060 8GB and a 5060 Ti, which would have an 8 and 16GB version. Would have been really nice if they could have somehow designed the memory bus to allow for 12GB cards in this price range, but, well, guess we get what we get. And we'll have to, this is still leaks and rumors, so, we could still hope that something better comes our way. Now, you may have seen a story about a 5090 recall because of fire hazard. Now, I never reported on that, but you may have seen it elsewhere. I think it's important to note that all signs point to this being false. So this apparently began at Kit Guru, where they were contacted by a viewer, a reader, or whatever. They were emailed with information saying that a store canceled a 5090 order, or explaining not why it wasn't, why the 5090 order was taking so long to fulfill, and claiming that while they had a few 5090 models of that variety that they had ordered in stock, they were being recalled due to fire hazard. Now, a recall of 5090s due to fire hazard would be a absolutely massive story if that was true. So Kit Guru did, try to get some evidence of this and was presented with an email that, again, is not in English, but they translate here. Basically, but this, again, is from the retailer, from the store. The store is claiming Nvidia has recalled a large number of video cards due to various safety issues. We currently have 5 units of this model in stock, but they all have to be returned due to an increased fire hazard. In this situation, we do not give priority to anyone. All customers are treated equally based on the ranking when pre-ordering or ordering the video cards. Now, Kit Guru reached out to this company, the store, and the CEO didn't seem to have any knowledge of this being a thing. So it seems like it was just this customer service representative, unless this email is somehow faked. Also, MSI has now responded and is saying that, because it's their model that was being referred to by the store, and they are responding very strongly that there is no recall in place. That's a major accusation and is completely false. Anyway, so they're saying, with this statement, we would like to make it clear that these allegations are absolutely false, that no recall program is in process, and that our products present no such risk. Furthermore, we would like to specify that this retailer is not one of MSI's partners, and we do not work with them. We reserve the right to initiate legal proceedings against those responsible for these highly defamatory allegations, which harm our brand's reputation, as well as against anyone contributing to their dissemination. And then they list some retailers that have an official partnership with MSI. Anyway, now, in other news, let's talk about FSR 4. First of all, if you were one of the first people to watch my FSR 4 review that came out on review embargo date, I very quickly made an edit to the video. You can trim it in place, and removed the DLSS 4 versus FSR footage. I'm adding this to one of my videos, in addition to having already immediately when I found the error posted a community post, updated the title of the video, and even replied to every single comment that mentioned the DLSS 4 versus FSR 4 comparison in the comment section. I replied to every single one of them, informing them of this error. But it looks like because the game I was testing did not natively support DLSS 4, I had added it via DLSS swapper. In the process, somehow the correct DLSS preset to apply the transformer model was not applied, which means that while it had swapped in the latest DLL for DLSS, it wasn't using the transformer model. It would have defaulted to an older preset using the CNN model. So if you did watch that initial video, I'm trying to talk to you right now to say, ignore the DLSS 4 model versus the FSR 4 model comparison in this video. However, much of this video is still a bunch of really interesting footage of, FSR 3 versus FSR 4, native TAA versus FSR 4, and DLSS 3.7.1 versus FSR 4, which is all good stuff. So I trimmed out the erroneous sections of the video, made a pinned comment, tried to reach out to everybody who may have seen the inaccurate information, and I apologize for that. It was an honest mistake. I fixed it as soon as I possibly could, and I am trying to reach out in every way possible to inform people of the mistake, including in video format. So if you do want some absolutely excellent coverage of DLSS 4 versus FSR 4, as well as DLSS 3 versus FSR 4, although check out this hardware unboxed video that just published today. Although it doesn't look like it goes into native TAA or FSR 3 versus FSR 4 in much detail. So again, my video still has some good coverage of that. Now, also, Digital Foundry has posted an FSR 4 review as well. So there's a lot of coverage you can take a look at here. Now, one thing I was really interested in that I did cover performance in my video. I covered the performance cost of FSR 3 versus FSR 4. In the Hardware Unboxed video, there's coverage of DLSS 4 versus FSR 4 and FSR 3 versus FSR 4. So there's more DLSS performance coverage because, again, there's one aspect of upscalers is their image quality. The other aspect is their performance because upscaling takes a performance cost, right? So the way FSR and DLSS, we're not talking frame generation, we're talking upscaling, boost performance, the way they get you more frames is by lowering the internal rendering resolution. This means your GPU takes less time to compute a frame, but then they need to apply the upscaling algorithm, which does take a certain amount of time. So the amount of performance you gain is the difference between how much time was saved by reducing the rendering resolution minus the amount of render time that gets added on for applying the upscaling algorithm. DLSS 4 is slower than DLSS 3, and FSR 4 is also slower than FSR 3. The hardware unboxed coverage does a good job of showing that, at least when comparing a 5070 Ti running DLSS 3 and 4 and a 9070 XT running FSR 3 and FSR 4, that the performance cost of DLSS 4 is pretty similar to the performance cost of FSR 4. So those are fairly in line in terms of what sort of performance boost you get. They test a number of games here. Watch the full video. Like, I highly recommend you watch this video if you are at all interested in FSR 4. I can't imagine how much time Tim spent capturing all of this footage. He got tons of games, really good stuff. Anyway, his overall conclusion, and my overall conclusion, and Digital Foundry's overall conclusion, those are the main reviews I've looked at so far for FSR 4, all seem to be pretty much in agreement that FSR 4 is a massive improvement over FSR 3.1, to the point where FSR 3.1, as you're showing here, was often distracting to the point where a lot of people would consider it unusable beyond like maybe 4K quality settings, unless you couldn't gain performance any other way. It could have been like a last resort. Now, other people are less bothered by the image quality. That's totally fine. But that's many people, including my own opinion of it in a lot of games. Now, FSR 4 is completely usable. It is very good. Not only is it usable, versus DLSS 3, the latest versions of DLSS 3, it's at least on par, if not maybe a little bit better. You can point out certain specific scenes where DLSS 3 still has a bit of an advantage, but you can also point out things that FSR 4 does better pretty consistently. And for a lot of people, you'll prefer one over the other, but I think my edge would go to FSR 4 in a lot of cases, due to it having a bit more sharpness and detail, like a little bit less of that TAA blur type of look. Whereas versus DLSS 4, when you apply it correctly, has even less of the TAA blur, constructs a little more detail, still has a little bit of an edge on certain edge reconstruction, edge smoothness, things like that, to where FSR 4 seems to mostly fall in most reviewers' minds between DLSS 3 and DLSS 4 in terms of image quality, and runs about as quickly as DLSS 4. So DLSS 4 does seem to still have a bit of an edge, but the gap has been closed massively to the point where I think for many people it's going to be actually fairly hard to pick out problems or differences just in normal gameplay. Although it does definitely still give DLSS 4 the edge in close analysis. And again, the loss of even less of the kind of TAA blur going on with DLSS 4 is a major plus. Anyway, that's kind of the overall thoughts, and it also kind of makes sense because from what we're seeing from some statements from AMD and what Tim refers to in his video is that FSR 4 seems to be a hybrid model using both CNN and transformer model techniques, which is interesting since DLSS 3 was the CNN model, DLSS 4 has moved to the transformer model. FSR 4 seems to be a hybrid and kind of fall in between in terms of a lot of the image quality characteristics and quality. So interesting stuff. A couple quick notes here at the end. One more thing about FSR 4. Interestingly, this seems to be a product of AMD's collaboration with PlayStation. I did a video a while back on Project Amethyst, which was initially unveiled by Sony's Mark Cerny when talking about their development of the PlayStation 5 Pro and their PSSR upscaling model. Now, it is very clear that FSR 4 is not PSSR, and that FSR 4 would probably struggle to run on PlayStation hardware due to FSR 4 seeming to rely on FP8, which is really an RDNA 4 thing, and even the PS5 Pro isn't fully RDNA 4. They kind of did their own custom machine learning block. But interesting that FSR 4 does seem to be coming from this research collaboration with Sony, and that means that that's probably going to be a heavy component of what I would guess happens with the PlayStation 6. Also, they're saying this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for what's next. AMD had discussed in their RDNA 4 unveiling of the 9070 and 9070 XT these GPUs being neural rendering ready. So it will be interesting to see what other sorts of neural rendering they're talking about. We did see them showing off their neural denoiser for a path tracing demo, although the quality of it didn't seem to live up to what we see with the latest versions of ray reconstruction, for example, from Nvidia, but still kind of interesting to see what they might be talking about here. Now, in other AMD news, but on the CPU side of things, we're seeing that it is now official that the availability for the 9950X3D and 9900X3D Ryzen 9 processors will be March 12th, and the pricing is officially $699 and $599 respectively. Now, remember AMD's X3D chips are, in most games, not every game, the fastest gaming CPUs available, and we already have had the 9800X3D for a while. However, that's 8-core 16-thread, and the 3D V-cache in many heavily multi-threaded like productivity workloads, isn't necessarily of much benefit, but having more cores would be. So the idea behind these CPUs is really you'll get that massive boost in gaming performance from the 3D V-cache, but you'll also be able to have either 16-core 32-thread or 12-core 24 threads to also excel in those heavily multi-threaded workloads. In the previous generations, that's come along with a slight gaming performance reduction compared to just getting the 8-core 16-thread model because of the split between the two CCDs, only one of the CCDs here having the 3D V-cache, potential thermal issues by having the additional cores, maybe having to clock a little bit lower, or potential thread scheduling issues where if it's not keeping all of the gaming stuff on the CCD that has the 3D V-cache. Not saying these aren't amazing for gaming, just that if you're only focused on gaming, in the previous 3D V-cache generations, it's been the 8-core 16-thread part that was the leader in that gaming performance and avoided any thread scheduling issues. Anyway, last thing I'll leave you with is a lot of people have been asking me, because I do test out a lot of new games' performance on a variety of PCs, what about Spider-Man 2, which seemed to have a rough launch from a performance perspective. Still haven't had a chance to take a look at it, but I did catch this headline that it did get another patch, and this patch is claiming to introduce CPU and GPU performance improvements as well as some ray tracing fixes. I have not been able to test this out to confirm it. Believe it or not, I've been pretty busy with the new GPU launch benchmarking and FSR testing and all sorts of stuff, and I still want to make tons more head-to-head videos with the new GPUs. I have so many cards tested, but it takes a long time to edit the side-by-side footage, make graphs, do commentary, and I've also been wanting to see what real-world market pricing kind of settles in at before doing value-focused comparisons, because you can't really talk about value until you know what something actually costs. Hopefully found you guys, hopefully you guys found this video useful and or interesting. Thank you to viewers, commenters, subscribers, channel members. You're all beautiful people, and I hope you have an excellent day.